We like to think society respects the people who do the most important work. But that's not really how it works. Some of the most essential jobs in society are underpaid, overlooked, and quietly disrespected. And some of the most admired jobs are admired less because they help people, and more because they signal success. That is the uncomfortable pattern. We say we respect contribution, but often we respect status. We say we honor usefulness, but often we admire scarcity, income, credentials, and proximity to elite systems. And once you start noticing that, modern work culture begins to look very strange. Because the jobs that keep daily life functioning are often treated as ordinary, low status, or replaceable. Meanwhile, jobs surrounded by authority, corporate prestige, financial power, or social symbolism often receive disproportionate admiration, even when their real contribution is indirect, abstract, or morally ambiguous. So what exactly are we respecting? Contribution? Or just status dressed up as value? Because if a society consistently respects the wrong jobs, it reveals something important about how that society actually measures human worth. Most societies like to believe they reward what matters, that the people doing the most necessary work will be valued accordingly. That effort, usefulness, and contribution naturally produce dignity and respect. It is a comforting story, and it has a moral elegance to it. In a healthy culture, the work that keeps people safe, fed, educated, healed, transported, protected, and cared for should command deep respect. Not because it is glamorous, but because it is foundational. Without it, normal life collapses. But that is not how respect actually moves through society. Respect is not distributed only through usefulness. It is shaped by class, by money, by prestige, by visibility, by exclusivity, by perceived intelligence, by proximity to institutions that already have power. That means a society can depend heavily on certain jobs while still treating them as low status. And once that happens, respect stops functioning like a moral signal. It starts functioning like a social ranking system. One of the most revealing features of modern society is that many necessary jobs are socially downgraded precisely because they are ordinary, physical, repetitive, service-oriented, or associated with care. Think about how many crucial functions are carried by people whose work is treated as background. Cleaners, drivers, nursing staff, care workers, delivery workers, food workers, maintenance workers, warehouse staff, sanitation workers, childcare workers, teachers in overstretched systems. These are not symbolic jobs. They are real interface jobs. They touch life directly. They keep systems running in material, human terms. And yet many of them are paid modestly, spoken about casually, and granted less social prestige than roles that are far less immediately necessary to everyday survival. Why? Because necessity alone does not generate admiration. In fact, work that is intimate, physical, repetitive, or associated with service is often culturally flattened. It becomes invisible precisely because society relies on it constantly. And once something becomes structurally familiar, people stop reading it as exceptional, even when it is indispensable. That is one of the cruelest distortions in modern labor culture. The more directly a job touches ordinary life, the easier it can become to overlook. If society respected jobs mainly according to their real social value, the prestige hierarchy would look very different. But prestige is not a clean measure of usefulness. It is a symbolic system. Jobs gain prestige not only because of what they do, but because of what they signal. High income signals success. Elite credentials signal intelligence. Scarcity signals importance. Corporate titles signal influence. Distance from manual labor signals class elevation. Association with finance, law, strategy, or executive power signals status. This is why some jobs carry prestige even when most people could not clearly explain how they improve daily life in concrete human terms. Their prestige is not always based on direct contribution. It is often based on abstraction, exclusivity, and institutional aura. Meanwhile, the jobs that involve care, logistics, bodily work, repair, cleaning, maintenance, and immediate service are often read as lower status, even though society would break far faster without them. That tells us something important. Respect is often being given not to what sustains life, but to what symbolizes elevation inside a class system. And once prestige becomes detached from necessity, the moral logic of labor starts to collapse. A lot of people claim they do not judge jobs by income, but modern society does it constantly, not always consciously, not always honestly, but structurally. The salary attached to a job changes how that job is perceived. High-income work is assumed to be difficult, impressive, intelligent, or worthy. Low-income work is often assumed to be simple, replaceable, low-skill, or less deserving of admiration. That assumption is deeply misleading. Some high-paid jobs are genuinely demanding and socially useful. Some are not. Some lower-paid jobs require enormous emotional control, physical stamina, social intelligence, reliability, and human endurance. But because the market prices them cheaply, society often reads them as low worth. This is one of the most powerful illusions in modern life. People confuse market price with human importance. But markets do not price dignity. They do not price moral value. They do not price social necessity in any pure way. They price according to leverage, scarcity, bargaining power, structure, and profitability. Once you understand that, a lot of labor prestige starts to look less like respect for contribution and more like obedience to market hierarchy. There is another pattern here that matters. Jobs involving direct human need are often easier to disrespect. Why? Because they are associated with dependency, vulnerability, mess, aging, childhood, illness, maintenance, and everyday survival. The parts of life modern status culture prefers to rise above. A society obsessed with ambition and upward mobility often admires distance from necessity more than closeness to it. That means the person making financial decisions in a glass tower may be treated as more admirable than the person physically caring for bodies, feeding people, transporting goods, cleaning spaces, or helping children learn. Not because the second group matters less, but because the first group is coded as upward. And upwardness is one of the most respected symbols in modern society. This is why the labor hierarchy often mirrors the class hierarchy so cleanly. The closer a job is to service, care, maintenance, or bodily reality, the easier it becomes to read it as lower. The closer a job is to abstraction, management, finance, credentials, or executive space, the easier it becomes to read it as important. That is not a neutral assessment of value. It is a cultural bias, and a very powerful one. The damage here is not only economic, it is psychological. When a society consistently respects the wrong jobs, people begin to absorb distorted ideas about themselves and others. They begin to confuse title with worth, income with dignity, prestige with intelligence, visibility with contribution. People in essential but lower status work may begin to feel smaller than they are. People in prestigious but ambiguous roles may receive more automatic admiration than they have truly examined. Child, doctor, narrator. Children learn which jobs sound impressive. Adult, investment banker. Narrator. Adults learn which jobs are safe to mention proudly. Narrator. Entire communities learn to rank people by labor symbolism rather than by what their work actually contributes to collective life. Narrator. This affects aspiration, it affects shame, it affects family expectations. Narrator. It affects who feels seen and who feels invisible. Narrator. And once enough people internalize those rankings, culture becomes less honest. Speaker. Respect for all work. Narrator. It talks about respect as though it were moral, but often it is merely hierarchical. Narrator. That is a dangerous thing for a society to normalize. Because once dignity gets tied too tightly to prestige, huge numbers of necessary people end up carrying life with very little social honor in return. Narrator. The point is not that every prestigious job is meaningless. That would be lazy. Narrator. Some high-status roles do require real expertise, deep responsibility, and enormous consequence. Narrator. And not every lower status job is automatically noble simply because it is underappreciated. Narrator, the real lesson is more precise. Narrator, a healthy society should know how to distinguish status from usefulness. Narrator, it should be able to ask better questions. Narrator, what work keeps life functioning? What work absorbs real human burden? What work creates direct social value? What work is admired mostly because of class coding, salary, exclusivity, or institutional aura? Narrator, those questions matter because respect shapes culture. Narrator, and culture shapes what people strive for, what they overlook, and who they quietly diminish. Narrator, if a society cannot respect necessary labor properly, it becomes morally confused. Narrator, it starts rewarding appearance over contribution, distance over usefulness, symbolism over substance. Narrator, that does not just distort labor markets, it distorts human worth. Narrator, and once that happens, people stop seeing clearly which work actually holds society together. Maybe that is the real problem. It is not just that some jobs are underpaid, it is that many are under-respected. And the jobs receiving the most admiration are not always the ones most deeply tied to human need, daily stability, or social survival. So yes, we often do respect the wrong jobs, not because contribution no longer matters at all, but because status, prestige, and market hierarchy have become stronger signals than usefulness. And once a society starts admiring symbols of success more than the labor that keeps life working, it reveals something uncomfortable. It reveals that respect was never only about value, it was also about class performance. And until that changes, many of the people holding society together will continue to live inside a strange contradiction, needed by everyone but admired far less than they deserve.